Welcome to Mythos AI, your source for Cliff's Notes on complex subjects. Join Anna and Phil for yet another engaging conversation.
Welcome to our deep dive into the answer from Quizzypedia, Season 207, Question 4.
Yes.
The category is American history.
Okay.
The question is this. Which historical theory, developed by American historian Frederick Jackson Turner, argues that the availability of unsettled land in the West profoundly shaped American democracy, individualism, and societal development? This thesis has been referenced in political rhetoric, including by President John F. Kennedy, to emphasize themes of American exceptionalism, self-reliance, and the pioneering spirit that have shaped the nation's identity and its approach to progress.
Okay, so the answer to that question is, of course, the Frontier Thesis.
Right.
And Frederick Jackson Turner, an American historian, presented this idea in 1893.
Okay.
His thesis went beyond arguing that the American frontier was simply land. He claimed it was a force shaping American character.
Interesting. And this was presented just as the U.S. Census Bureau declared the frontier closed in 1890. So Turner's thesis arrived at a pivotal moment when many Americans were grappling with what it meant to be American if the frontier was gone.
Right. So Turner himself had witnessed westward expansion. And this personal experience really informed his belief that it profoundly shaped American identity.
Okay.
And he put forth several core ideas.
What were they?
First, he argued that life on the frontier demanded self-reliance and resilience.
Okay.
There was a ruggedness to it that forged a spirit of equality.
I see.
Then he believed that the lack of established institutions in the West actually fostered more democratic practices. This was quite different from the East, where things were more settled and traditional. And it was this constant push westward that, according to Turner, fueled American dynamism and progress.
One of his most intriguing ideas was this concept of the frontier as a safety valve.
Yes.
What did he mean by that?
So this implied that people who felt stifled or unhappy in the East could always move west for a fresh start.
So a way to escape social constraints, economic hardship, or even just the general feeling of being stuck.
Exactly. And Turner suggested that this westward migration acted as a release valve for social tension. It helped to maintain stability, prevent social unrest.
So it was about more than just physical space,
Yeah.
more of a psychological and social outlet.
Exactly.
Turner was essentially arguing that the very essence of American democracy and individualism was deeply intertwined with this frontier experience.
That's right.
So the frontier, in Turner's view, became a crucible where these values were forged.
Yes.
And this ties directly into the impact of the Frontier Thesis on American society, particularly the concept of American exceptionalism.
Right.
The belief that the United States had a unique mission to spread democracy and freedom around the world. This sense of mission is often linked back to that frontier experience.
Yes.
And if we look at American political institutions, we can see the influence of the frontier in the emphasis on local governance and participatory democracy.
Yeah.
These ideas took root in the West, where settlers had to rely on themselves and their communities to create order and make decisions.
Right. The frontier experience contributed to a certain distrust of centralized authority and a preference for local control, something that still resonates in American politics today.
And you can't ignore the social impact either. The frontier's emphasis on equality and the rejection of rigid social hierarchies, in contrast to the more stratified East, became a defining feature of American political culture.
Yeah.
In the West, your worth was judged by your grit and determination, not your family name or social standing.
Precisely. That emphasis on individual merit and self-reliance became a cornerstone of the American dream. Now, moving from the abstract realm of ideas to their practical application, we see how this frontier spirit found its way into political rhetoric, particularly in the 20th century.
Figures like President John F. Kennedy come to mind.
Yes, Kennedy's famous New Frontier program directly invoked this imagery,
How so?
positioning challenges like the space race and the fight for civil rights as new frontiers to be conquered.
Interesting.
This wasn't just clever wording. Kennedy strategically used this language to tap into that deep-seated American belief in progress and overcoming obstacles.
And it's fascinating how that imagery still resonates today, whether it's about exploring new technologies, breaking down social barriers, or pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. The imagery of pioneers is still evoked to inspire and call for action.
It speaks to the enduring power of that frontier narrative in the American psyche.
However, as we move forward, it's important to acknowledge that the Frontier Thesis hasn't been without its critics.
Of course.
These criticisms are vital to understand. One of the most significant points raised is that Turner's thesis largely ignores the experiences of Native Americans, women, and other minority groups.
Yes.
It paints an incomplete, and some argue romanticized, picture of westward expansion.
That's a key point. Critics argue that the thesis focuses on opportunity and progress, but often glosses over the displacement, the violence, and hardship experienced by those who are already here.
Particularly indigenous populations.
Exactly. It's true. Turner's focus on white male settlers creates a skewed perspective that doesn't fully account for the diversity of experiences on the frontier. And by emphasizing individual achievement, it downplays the role of collective action, government support, and even luck in shaping success on the frontier.
So while Turner saw the frontier as this engine of democracy and equality, critics argue that he overlooked the very real inequalities and injustices that were also present. It's a reminder that history is rarely simple or straightforward.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember that there were many different frontiers across the West with their own unique characteristics and challenges. Turner's generalizations about the frontier don't always hold up under closer scrutiny.
So it's important to avoid oversimplifying a complex historical process. Attributing American identity solely to the frontier ignores other crucial factors, like European intellectual traditions, the legacy of slavery, and the rise of industrial capitalism.
Right. And in modern times, historians and scholars have been revisiting the frontier thesis through new lenses, including environmental history and post-colonial theory, which offer valuable critiques and insights.
How do these perspectives challenge our understanding of the frontier?
Well, environmental historians, for example, highlight the ecological consequences of westward expansion. They point to the depletion of natural resources, deforestation, and the impact on wildlife. Turner celebrated the triumph of civilization over wilderness. But today we recognize the environmental cost of that progress.
So while the frontier may have seemed boundless at the time, there were real limits to its resources, and the drive to exploit those resources had lasting environmental consequences.
Exactly. And this ties into the critique from post-colonial theory, which examines the power dynamics between colonizers and colonized peoples. Post-colonial scholars argue that the frontier mentality was rooted in a belief in European superiority and a right to dominate and exploit both land and people.
This perspective reveals a darker side to that frontier spirit, connecting it to manifest destiny. The idea that American expansion was preordained and justified, regardless of who stood in its way. It makes us question whether the frontier experience, which supposedly promoted democracy and equality at home, may have actually laid the groundwork for imperial ambitions abroad.
That's a thought-provoking connection. It suggests that the frontier, far from being a purely American phenomenon, was part of a larger global story of colonialism and expansion.
And it challenges us to think about the legacies of that expansion, both within the United States and beyond, in terms of power, inequality, and our relationship with the environment.
It's a reminder that history isn't just something that happened in the past. It continues to shape our present in profound ways. But what's fascinating is that despite these criticisms, the frontier thesis continues to be applied to contemporary issues and even future possibilities. It's almost as if we're searching for new frontiers to conquer.
It's true. Think about the language we use to describe technological innovation, space exploration, or even the frontiers of medical research. It's all about pushing boundaries, exploring the unknown, overcoming obstacles. That same spirit Turner attributed to the frontier experience.
Exactly. The frontier, even though the physical one is closed, remains this powerful metaphor for progress, innovation, and the pursuit of something greater than ourselves.
So in a way, the frontier lives on in our collective imagination, influencing our goals, our aspirations, and even the way we define success. It's almost as if that frontier spirit is woven into the fabric of American culture.
Right. And that brings us to the profound impact the frontier has had on American culture, particularly in literature and the arts.
It's hard to imagine American literature without the frontier. Authors like Mark Twain immediately come to mind.
Of course, Twain captured the spirit of the frontier, the humor, the adventure, the larger-than-life characters, but he also offered a critical perspective, exposing the hypocrisy and violence that often went hand in hand with westward expansion.
And what about the Western genre? It's become an iconic part of American storytelling.
Absolutely. From classic films like The Searchers to modern reinterpretations like Unforgiven, the Western genre explores the themes of frontier life, the clash between civilization and wilderness, the struggle for survival, and the complex moral dilemmas faced by those on the edge of society.
These stories often romanticize the frontier, but they also reveal its darker side. The violence, The displacement of indigenous populations, the environmental degradation, the loneliness and isolation of frontier life, all of these aspects found their way into the Western genre, making it both entertaining and thought-provoking.
Right. It's a genre that forces us to confront the complexities of the frontier and its enduring legacy. It allows us to grapple with the contradictions of a historical period that was both inspiring and troubling.
And it speaks to the enduring power of the frontier in shaping our understanding of who we are as Americans.
It's true. But as we continue to explore this topic, it's important to circle back to the environmental impact of the frontier, something we touched upon earlier.
Yes, this is an aspect of the frontier experience that deserves further attention. We've already discussed deforestation and resource depletion, but are there any other striking examples of how westward expansion transformed the environment?
The near extinction of the American bison is a tragic and poignant example. In the 19th century, millions of bison roamed the Great Plains, playing a central role in the lives of Native American tribes. But as settlers moved west, the bison were hunted relentlessly, often for sport or to clear the land for cattle ranching. This wasn't just about hunting for food. It was a deliberate campaign to undermine Native American ways of life.
It's a heartbreaking example of how human actions, driven by economic interests and a sense of entitlement, can have devastating consequences for the natural world. It's a stark reminder of the fragility of ecosystems and the need for responsible stewardship.
Absolutely. And it underscores the contrast between Turner's celebratory view of the frontier as a triumph of civilization over wilderness and our modern understanding of the interconnectedness between humans and the environment.
This critique of the frontier model of development is especially relevant today as we grapple with issues like climate change, biodiversity loss, and the depletion of natural resources. It forces us to rethink our relationship with the natural world and to consider more sustainable ways of living on this planet.
Indeed. The legacy of resource exploitation and environmental degradation associated with the frontier era continues to shape our relationship with the natural world, and it presents us with challenges that demand innovative solutions.
So while we can learn from the resilience and ingenuity of those who settled the frontier, we also need to acknowledge the mistakes of the past and chart a different course for the future.
Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about the impact of the Frontier Thesis on American education. It's been hugely influential in shaping how we understand our own history.
How has Turner's work influenced the way American history is taught and learned?
The Frontier Thesis has been a cornerstone of American history curricula for decades. It provided a framework for understanding westward expansion and its role in shaping American identity values and institutions. It's been used to explain everything from American individualism and democracy to our entrepreneurial spirit and our love of technology.
So in many ways, Turner's ideas have become deeply ingrained in the way we think about ourselves as Americans.
Yes. But it's important to note that Turner's work has also sparked considerable debate and further research within academia. And this debate has actually led to a more nuanced and inclusive approach to studying American history.
In what ways?
Well, historians started to question Turner's focus on the white male experience, recognizing the need to incorporate the perspectives of Native Americans, women, African Americans, and other groups whose stories had been marginalized or ignored. They also began to question that simplistic narrative of progress and triumph that characterized Turner's thesis, paying more attention to the conflicts, the inequalities, and the environmental costs of westward expansion.
So while Turner's work provided a starting point, it's been refined and challenged over time, leading to a richer and more complex understanding of American history.
Exactly. And this ongoing dialogue is a testament to the vitality of historical inquiry.
Right.
It demonstrates that history isn't a static set of facts, but a dynamic process of interpretation and reinterpretation.
It's a reminder that we're always learning, always discovering new perspectives, and always refining our understanding of the past.
And that's what makes history so fascinating. It's a conversation that continues across generations, always prompting us to ask new questions and to seek deeper truths.
And this evolution in historiography reflects a broader trend towards more comprehensive and critical examinations of history.
Exactly.
It's a reminder that history is an ongoing conversation, always open to new interpretations and perspectives. And beyond its influence on traditional historical narratives, the Frontier Thesis has also shaped research methodologies.
Yes. Turner's emphasis on the interplay between geography, culture, and societal change encouraged historians to look beyond purely political or economic factors. It broadened the scope of historical inquiry. This focus on the environment's role in shaping human activity remains relevant in various interdisciplinary fields today. So while the frontier thesis has its limitations, its influence on how we study and understand American history is undeniable.
It remains a powerful framework for understanding the spirit of expansion, the belief in progress, and the perception of the United States as a land of opportunity.
Right.
But, as we've discussed, it's crucial to approach the thesis with a critical eye, acknowledging its omissions and biases.
Yes, a balanced perspective is essential. We need to recognize the complexities of westward expansion, including the displacement and suffering of indigenous populations, as well as the environmental costs. So while the frontier thesis offers valuable insights, it's not a complete or unproblematic explanation of American history.
It's one interpretation among many, and it's our responsibility to engage with it critically, considering its strengths and weaknesses. And as we grapple with contemporary issues of inequality, imperialism, and environmental sustainability, the frontier thesis can serve as a lens through which to examine the historical roots of these challenges.
Precisely. It helps us understand how the expansionist mindset and the legacy of resource exploitation continue to shape our present. So while the physical frontier may be closed, the frontier mentality, with both its positive and negative aspects, persists in different forms.
It's up to us to learn from the past, critically evaluate our inherited narratives, and forge a more just and sustainable future. The frontier thesis, then, is not just a historical theory, but a framework for ongoing dialogue and reflection.
Precisely. It's a starting point for a deeper understanding of American history and its continuing relevance in our modern world.
So, as we conclude our deep dive into the frontier thesis, what key takeaways should our listeners keep in mind?
First, the frontier thesis highlights the profound influence of westward expansion on American identity, values, and institutions. This expansion fostered a spirit of individualism, self-reliance, and democratic ideals that continue to shape the nation. But second, it's crucial to acknowledge the thesis's shortcomings, particularly its neglect of the experiences of Native Americans, women, and other marginalized groups.
Right.
Westward expansion was a complex and often brutal process, and the frontier thesis tends to romanticize it. Third, modern perspectives, informed by fields like environmental history and post-colonial theory, have enriched our understanding of the frontier and its legacies. We now recognize the significant environmental costs of expansion and the ways in which the frontier mentality contributed to American imperialism. And finally, the frontier thesis, despite its flaws, remains a powerful and thought-provoking framework for understanding American history and its ongoing relevance.
It prompts us to examine the origins of our national identity, the complexities of our past, and the challenges we face in the present. It also encourages us to consider what new frontiers we might encounter in the 21st century, be they technological, scientific, or social, and how we can approach them with a more inclusive and sustainable mindset.
Exactly.
Ultimately, the frontier thesis is not just about the past. It's about how we understand ourselves as a nation and how we navigate the challenges and opportunities of the future. The frontier, even as a closed physical space, continues to capture our imagination and shape our aspirations. And that brings us back to the question posed in Quizzypedia. If the frontier is closed, where do we find that same spirit of innovation and opportunity in the modern world?
That's a question worth pondering. Perhaps we need to redefine what constitutes a frontier. It may no longer be about geographical expansion, but about pushing the boundaries of knowledge, technology, and social progress.
So instead of looking westward, we might look inward towards our own potential and the challenges that face our society.
Exactly. What are the new frontiers that demand our creativity, resilience, and spirit of collaboration? Are they in the fields of renewable energy, artificial intelligence, or perhaps in addressing issues like poverty and inequality?
These are certainly areas ripe for exploration and innovation, requiring that same pioneering spirit that Turner attributed to the frontier experience.
Indeed. And just as the frontier shaped American identity in the past, these new frontiers have the potential to shape our future, both as a nation and as global citizens. It's a call to action, then, to embrace the challenges of our time with the same boldness and ingenuity that characterized those who ventured westward.
Precisely. And perhaps by understanding the complexities of the frontier and its legacy, we can approach these new frontiers with a greater awareness of the potential pitfalls and a deeper commitment to inclusivity and sustainability. So while the physical frontier may be a thing of the past, the frontier spirit, the drive to explore, innovate, and build a better future, remains very much alive.
And it's up to each of us to find our own frontiers, those areas where we can make a meaningful contribution to the world. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Frontier Thesis. We hope it sparked your curiosity and inspired you to consider the enduring influence of the frontier on American history and its continuing relevance in our modern world.
Thanks for listening to Mythos AI. Stay tuned for more concise insights. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future episodes.